Did you know that the way you structure your meals can actually help you reduce the urge to binge? It's not necessarily about willpower or having more discipline. It's actually about eating in a way that works with your body rather than against it. And I'm going to show you exactly how you can do that. My name is Lara Zibarras. I'm a binge eating recovery coach and I help women heal their relationship with food. And in working with women, one of the patterns that I commonly see is this restrict and then binge cycle. And it's also one of the most misunderstood. People often think that they binge because they lack self-control or they lack discipline or they don't have enough willpower. But actually, in a lot of cases, the binge is the physical reaction to not eating enough, to underfueling, to being underfed, restriction, or eating in a way that isn't satisfying you. So today I want to look at more of a practical side, how to structure your meals in a way that your body feels nourished and satisfied and it's truly meeting your needs. And what you will find over time is that the urge to binge will slowly start to go away. So let's get into it with my 8 tips for building a more balanced meal that's going to help reduce that urge to binge. So the first thing that you want to do is start with your protein source. Protein is such a great macronutrient for helping you reduce the urge to binge because it increases that sense of satiety or fullness. And then what you can do after that is build the rest of your meal around that protein source. So when you think protein, you can think of animal sources, so things like meat, fish, eggs, Greek yogurt, plant-based sources like tofu or tempeh, beans, lentils, pulses, and secondary sources can be things like cheese, nuts, nut butters, seeds, quinoa, even some vegetables like broccoli, asparagus, and Brussels sprouts have protein in them. So very first step is thinking about protein. The second step is to add fiber to that protein. Alongside protein, fiber is really important for helping you feel that sensation of fullness. Fiber slows down your digestion and it helps you feel satisfied for longer. It's very true that most people do not get enough fiber in their diet, and it's great for your gut health more generally. And that has a positive knock on to things like cravings and energy and your mood. So in terms of what to add, you can choose things like fruits and vegetables. Also, beans and pulses are a great source of fiber, as are whole grains, nuts and seeds as well. So you can see there's a bit of overlap with some of the protein sources, but also the fiber sources. And a helpful guide is to think about colour and variety. So if you think across the course of your week, are you adding lots of colour into your meals? The third point is to not skip on the fat. I feel like fat has been demonized over the years, and a lot of people may decide that they don't want to have too much fat in their diet. Fat is really essential. Not only does it give a sense of satiety in our meals, but also as women, it's really important for fat-soluble vitamins. And as we get older, we really do genuinely need fat in our diet for hormones and so on. Fat really is what can make food taste really nice. So it is something that helps us create that sense of satisfaction when we eat. So it is possible to feel full but not satisfied. And actually we want both. We want to feel full and also satisfied when we leave the table. And you see, the problem is if you don't have that sense of satiety, what can happen is that because you don't feel satisfied when you leave the table, your brain keeps searching for more food. So what sometimes people find is that they may feel that they have eaten enough volume, but they're not feeling satisfied. So they go and search for more things to eat afterwards. So it does not do anything to reduce the urge to binge. So having a bit of fat in your meals can help reduce that urge to binge because you feel satisfied. And you can think of things like nuts, again, good source of fat, as are seeds, but also oils. You might think of having a little bit of avocado oil, sesame oil. Avocados are also a great source of fat. Things like butter, cheese, also oily fishes like salmon and mackerel are great sources of fat too. And you really only need a little bit to get that sense of satisfaction. You can use a thumb sized amount to get what you need in a particular meal. The next step is to include carbohydrates. Now, I am aware that fibre is carbohydrates, but I'm thinking here more about other carbohydrates. Now, carbs are also something that have been demonized over the years, and carbs often get cut when people are trying to eat less. But the problem is when you cut too many carbohydrates from your diet, that urge to binge can also increase. Carbohydrates are your body's main source of energy. And again, if you don't eat enough, your body keeps searching for that source of energy, which leads to binging. And this is especially true if you're active. So if you are an active person, you definitely want to make sure that you're having enough carbs. So here I'm thinking, and again, you'll see the overlap with the fiber, but here I'm thinking like whole grains, could be whole grain pasta, bread, starchy vegetables, potatoes, sweet potatoes, rice, oats, those kinds of things. Now, the fifth thing you want to think about is satisfaction. Now, I did briefly cover that when we were talking about fat, but this is such an important part of the puzzle for making sure that you reduce that urge to binge. So like I said earlier, feeling physically full, like I have food in my stomach, is very different to feeling that sense of satisfaction. And you can eat a technically very quote unquote healthy meal, but afterwards you might feel that pull to keep eating. And that's because the meal didn't actually satisfy you. And this links to the brain's pleasure pathway when it's linked to food. So it wants to feel that sense of satisfaction, that kind of almost like sense of reward, not just fuel. If meals feel repetitive or joyless or boring, then your brain will still keep searching for that sense of satisfaction, that sense of satiety. So what you want to do is make sure that your meals also include something that you genuinely enjoy. So you want to have that feeling of like, oof, that tasted delicious when you leave the table at the end of it. And you'll find that having that will absolutely reduce your urge to binge. My sixth point is this idea of adding rather than subtracting. So if you have been on any diets or healthy eating plans, you will probably have cut foods out of your diet. We absolutely don't want to do that, but we want to add instead of taking away. And this is a huge mindset shift, because if you have dieted for a while or been on healthy eating plans, there is that mindset of what you shouldn't eat. So I would say, rather than doing that, you want to ask the question, what can I add to this to make it more nourishing or satisfying or more balanced? So for example, let's imagine you wanted to eat some crisps. Then I would say, what can you add to that to make it satisfying, more nourishing or more balanced? So maybe alongside your crisps, you have sliced apple or some fruit. So now it's a bit more of a balanced and filling snack. Or if you fancy some chocolate, again, what can you have alongside it to make it more balanced or nourishing? So maybe you have a sliced apple as well, or maybe you have a handful of nuts alongside that chocolate. So you're not restricting the chocolate, but you're just asking yourself, what can you add to make it more nourishing and balanced? And this really matters for binging, because any form of restriction, even if it's that kind of mental restriction, will keep you stuck in that restrict and then binge cycle. So if you are having those cravings or desire for certain foods, it's thinking, what can I add to this to make it more nourishing? So the seventh thing to say is to eat regularly. Don't let yourself get too hungry. Going too long between meals is something that can really set off a binge, or even skipping breakfast or having a super light lunch. What you do is you set yourself up to binge later in the day. So we want to make sure that we are eating much more regularly. I would say you want to be eating every 3 to 4 hours, and every 3 to 4 hours having a meal or snack. So that might look like 3 meals in a day and 2 snacks, or it might be 1 snack. However it works for you, depends on what time you get up and all that kind of thing, but not going too long between meals. Now, obviously, this doesn't have to be rigid or necessarily clock watching. It's just not allowing yourself to go too long between meals, because what can happen is if your blood sugar levels drop too low, then it's very hard to resist the urge to binge. So that regular eating can prevent that from happening. And my final point is to incorporate a lot of flexibility into this whole thing. So what I've said here, this is meant to be a guide. These are not rigid rules. You don't have to follow everything to the T every single day. We're not looking for perfection. And I think one way that people like to think about this is to zoom out across the course of a week and look at what you are doing across a week rather than zooming in on any one meal or snack. If one meal in your day is completely unbalanced, then that really doesn't matter. If you are on general eating in a balanced way across the course of a week, if you suddenly have 6 hours between a meal, again, don't beat yourself up. Just try and go back to that normal, regular eating again. If you have a couple of meals where there's no fibre or where there's no protein, again, not a big deal. So we're trying to use all of what I've said in a very loose guide way, a flexible approach to eating, rather than using this as rigid rules to beat yourself up if you don't stick to them all the time. So just to recap then, if you build your meals in a certain way, then it really can reduce that urge to binge, especially if you're also eating regularly and using everything that I've said in a sort of flexible guideline kind of way. So as a side note here, if you want to go into a bit more detail about what this might look like for you, then I highly recommend my binge-free method mini course. This goes into a lot more detail of uncovering what's keeping you in the binge at the moment, and then building nourishing and sustainable meals and an approach to eating that will really help reduce that urge to binge. A good video to watch next is a video I did on food noise, which I've put here. And if you like this video, then do give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.